The scent was foreign. A sharp, cloying sweetness of a perfume I'd never buy, clinging to the collar of his favorite blue shirt. It was a Thursday, laundry day. I stood in the steam-filled laundry room, the rhythmic hum of the washer the only sound, holding the crisp cotton to my face. The smell wasn't just unfamiliar, it was an invasion. A whisper in a language I didn't speak, left in the most intimate of spaces, against the skin of my husband's neck. My world, so carefully and lovingly built over 15 years, quietly, irrevocably split into a before and an after in that damp, hot little room. If this emotional story already has your attention, please tap like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. I read every city, and it truly makes this space feel like a shared journey, a quiet room where our stories can meet. My name is Clara. For 15 years, my life was not just a shared life, but a shared project. The grand, all-consuming project of us, Daniel and Clara. We met in our final year of college, two painfully shy library dwellers who found an unexpected courage in each other's quiet company. He was studying business, full of big, nervous ideas about disruptive tech. I was an art student, my world defined by color palettes and negative space. He was solid where I was fluid. He provided the blueprint, I imagined the interior. It felt like a perfect fit. His dream was to build his own tech consultancy. He'd talk for hours about agile systems and client acquisition, his eyes alight with a passion that was beautiful to witness. I believed in that dream, perhaps more ferociously than he did in the early shaky days. After graduation, my steady job as a junior graphic designer at a small firm paid the rent on our one-bedroom apartment while he built his business from a second-hand desk in our tiny second bedroom. I didn't mind the long hours I spent on freelance design work after my day job ended. I was investing, not just in Daniel's company, but in our future, in the U.S. Every logo I designed for extra cash, every late-night website I built, was a brick I was laying in the foundation of our shared life. I saw my labor not as a sacrifice, but as a contribution to a joint account of dreams. When his business, Apex Digital Solutions, finally began to turn a consistent profit after 3 grueling years, it felt like our collective victory. We celebrated with cheap champagne on our apartment floor. It was then we made the decision that seemed logical, economical, perfect. I would leave my job to manage the company's branding, website, and all client-facing presentations full-time. It made absolute sense. I was already doing most of it piecemeal, and I was good at it. "We're a team," he'd say, pulling me into a hug that felt like a seal on our partnership. "True partners. This way, every dollar stays in the family." Our finances, which had been somewhat separate, merged completely. My independent income stream dried up, but our life, at least on the surface, began to expand. We were a single economic unit. We bought a house, not just any house, but a charming, slightly run-down cottage on the outskirts of town with a sprawling, neglected garden. It was a project. Our project. I saw past the peeling wallpaper and cracked tiles. I saw a home. We talked about filling it with children, with the noise and chaos of a family. I poured myself into its restoration with the same zeal I'd poured into his business. I learned to sand floors, to hang drywall, to grout tile. My hands, once used to delicate pencil sketches, grew calloused. I planted rose bushes along the fence line, dreaming of the day their scent would drift through our kitchen window. The house became my new canvas, my new contribution to the U.S. The work for Apex was all-consuming, but it was our work. I was the silent, efficient engine in the machine of his public success. I handled everything behind the gleaming curtain. The invoicing, the chasing of payments, the quarterly tax filings that made my head spin. I planned and cooked for client dinners at our home, presenting a facade of effortless domestic and professional harmony. I attended networking events, standing by his side in the clothes we'd bought from the business account, smiling, nodding, making connections that he would later follow up on. My world subtly shrank to the walls of our home and the glow of my computer screen. My own friends, busy with their careers and young families, slowly drifted away. We had less and less in common. Daniel became my best friend, my confidant, my colleagues, my entire social universe. I gave him everything: my time, my professional talent, my financial independence, my unwavering emotional faith. I entrusted him with the totality of my adult life. There were small cracks, of course, hairline fractures in the glossy surface. Times I felt less like a partner and more like a highly dedicated, unpaid employee. When I'd tentatively suggest a weekend away, just the two of us, he'd sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Not this quarter, sweetheart. The cash flow is too tight. We have to be smart." But then he'd come home with a new expensive watch. "For client meetings," he'd explain, kissing my forehead. "Image is everything." I'd noticed the password on our shared laptop, the one I used for design work, would change without him giving me the new one. "Just a mandatory security upgrade," he'd murmur, already distracted by his phone. I trained myself diligently not to ask too many questions, to be the easy, supportive, uncomplicated partner, the one who didn't nag, the one who understood the immense pressures he was under to provide, to grow, to succeed for us. The moral fault line was simple, profound, and I walked over it blindly every single day. I had willingly, lovingly entrusted my entire worth, financial, emotional, social, to the integrity and goodwill of one man. I had built my beautiful home, my sense of purpose, my very identity, on what I believed was the unshakable bedrock of us, without ever pausing to check if the ground beneath his feet was made of the same solid stone. The shift was subtle at first, a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm. It centered on his phone. The device transformed from a tool into a guardian. It lived face down on tables, screen against the wood. It accompanied him to the bathroom for his showers. It slept plugged in on his side of the bed, a tiny blue-lit sentinel. When it buzzed or chimed, his reaction became a studied performance. He'd glance at it with a quick, secretive flick of his eyes, his body subtly turning away from me. And then, sometimes, a tiny, private smile would play on his lips before he'd dismiss the notification. A smile that didn't reach his eyes when he looked at me. A smile that belonged to a separate world. One night, about 2 months after I first noticed the change, he was in the shower. The ensuite door was closed, the sound of rushing water a steady white noise. His phone, left charging on his nightstand, lit up with a notification. The screen glowed in the dark bedroom. From where I sat on my side of the bed, pretending to read, the preview text was clearly visible. It was from a contact saved as K. Peterson, client. The message read, "Can't stop thinking about last night. Your wife doesn't know how lucky she is." The air in the room vanished. A vacuum opened in my chest where my heart had been. I sat perfectly still, the book a dead weight in my hands. Client. The word echoed, hollow and mocking, in the new, empty space inside me. The steam from the bathroom under the door began to feel suffocating, a hot fog coiling around my ankles. I heard the water shut off, the sound of the curtain rings scraping back. Move. I had to move. With a mechanical stiffness, I placed my book on the nightstand, stood up, and walked out of the bedroom. I went downstairs to the kitchen, my body moving on autopilot. I filled the kettle. My hands were shaking so violently that the spout clattered against the rim of the kettle. I spilled boiling water on the granite countertop, watching it pool and steam. When he came downstairs a few minutes later, a towel around his waist, his hair damp, he went straight for his phone on the kitchen island. I watched him, the steam from my untouched mug of tea rising between us like a specter. He picked it up, unlocked it. I saw his face. He read the message, and that same small, private, pleased smile appeared. It was the expression of a man receiving a delicious compliment. There was no guilt, no panic, no furtive glance my way. He typed a quick reply, thumbs flying, then placed the phone back down, screen facing the marble. "Everything okay?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, miraculously steady, almost casual. He looked up, as if remembering I was there. "Oh, yeah, just a client with a last-minute question. Needy, but what can you do?" He didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he opened the fridge and peered inside. "Nothing to worry about." In that moment, standing in the kitchen of the house I had restored, the kettle hissing softly, the foundation of my 15 years gave a sickening, seismic lurch. The man I had built my life with, the man I trusted with my whole heart and future, was looking right at me and lying. Not with a stammer or a blush, but with a breathtaking, casual ease. The us I had dedicated myself to had, in an instant, become a me and a him. And he was living in a world where I was an afterthought. The following weeks were a slow-motion exercise in torture. I became a ghost in my own home, a silent, haunted detective sickened by my own suspicions. The cheerful, supportive wife was a mask I wore during the day. At night, and in the stolen moments when he was out, I investigated the ruins of my marriage. I started with the phone bills, accessed through our shared online account. The logs were a cold, numeric indictment. There were hundreds of texts exchanged with K. Peterson, client, not dozens, hundreds. Late at night, long after he'd kissed me goodnight and rolled over. Early in the morning, before dawn, during the middle of weekdays, times his shared calendar proudly displayed blocks labeled Client Strategy Session or Budget Review. There were also hour-long phone calls, some stretching past midnight. I began to notice a new pattern in our finances. I still managed the household account, paying the mortgage and utilities. But the business account, which I no longer had direct login access to, seemed to leak strange expenses into our joint life. A mysterious ATM withdrawal for $200 on a Thursday evening. The same night he told me he was working late to prepare a big proposal. A credit card charge for an elegant, famously romantic hotel restaurant downtown, on a Tuesday when his calendar stated he was at an all-day tech conference an hour away. When I gently, cautiously asked about the ATM withdrawal over dinner, aiming for a tone of wifely concern, he sighed, a sound of profound exasperation. "Clara, it was cash for the office coffee fund and pizza for the interns. For heaven's sake, don't start micromanaging me. You know how much stress I'm under." He said it while cutting his steak, not looking up. The dismissal was so complete, so final, that it stole the breath from my next question. The emotional and physical cost was a daily, corrosive erosion. Sleep became a foreign country. I'd lie rigid in the dark beside him, listening to his deep, untroubled breathing, while my mind raced in frantic, agonizing circles. I stopped eating properly. Food lost its taste. I'd make elaborate meals for him, pushing my own portion around the plate. The weight fell off me. My clothes began to hang. A fine, constant tremor developed in my hands. I'd find myself staring at my own reflection in the kitchen window at dusk. A pale, hollow-eyed stranger living my life, moving through my beautiful kitchen like a sleepwalker. I was pouring every ounce of my energy into the performance of normalcy, into being the calm, unshakable foundation he expected, while inside, the structure was crumbling into dust. I tried, in my faltering way, to reach for him, to bridge the terrifying chasm I felt opening up. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the silence between us thicker than the winter fog outside, I gathered my courage. "Daniel," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "We feel so distant lately. Are you happy? With us?" He looked up from his tablet, his expression one of genuine, baffled surprise. "Of course I am. What kind of question is that? I'm just buried with work stress. You know how it is." He reached across the sofa and patted my hand. It wasn't a loving grasp. It was a patronizing, dismissive pat, the kind you'd give a slightly anxious child. "Don't go creating problems where there aren't any, okay? You've always been so sensitive." The final damning incident before the true reveal was the weekend of the team building retreat. He announced it a week prior, explaining that his key developers needed morale boosting. "We're renting a cabin up north, 2 nights, lots of brainstorming and bonfires." He packed with an unusual, almost giddy care. He bought a new suitcase, a sleek, hard-shell carry-on I'd never seen before. As he zipped it closed in our bedroom, the compression folds caught for a second. In that gap, I saw a flash of fabric that stopped my heart. It was black. It was lace. A delicate, intricate black lace negligee, unmistakably not meant for hiking, trust falls, or brainstorming around a fire. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I stood frozen in the doorway. "Since when does your tech team do overnight retreats?" I managed to ask, my voice thin and reedy. "I thought that was more of a sales thing." "New initiative," he said breezily, not looking at me as he tested the suitcase's weight. "Gotta keep the talent happy and motivated. It's an investment." He straightened up, walked over, and kissed my cheek. His skin was warm. He smelled of his usual cologne. "Don't wait up. I'll probably have terrible service." He left with a wave. I spent that weekend in the beautiful, silent, empty house. It felt like a museum dedicated to a broken dream. Every polished surface, every thriving plant, every perfectly placed cushion mocked me. I didn't cry. I was past that. I simply sat for hours in the garden, on the bench I'd placed under the willow tree, staring at the rose bushes I'd planted for our future. A profound, chilling certainty settled over me like a frost. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a passing flirtation. My marriage, the central load-bearing pillar of my entire existence, was a lie. And the most terrifying part was this. I was utterly, completely dependent, financially, legally, socially, on the man who was living that lie. I was a bird in a gilded cage, and the keeper had forgotten I was there. The Monday after his retreat, he returned energized, almost buzzing with a satisfied hum. He was back in his home office by 7 a.m., the door closed, already on calls. I moved through the house like the ghost I had become. The silence a physical weight. I needed to find a document. Our home insurance papers, which were due for renewal. They were usually kept in the filing cabinet in his office. Around mid-morning, I heard him start a video call, his voice booming with false bonhomie. "Great to see you all. Let's dive right into the Q2 roadmap." His office door was slightly ajar. I slipped in, giving him a small, mute wave. He glanced at me, nodded distractedly, and turned back to his screen. I moved quietly to the filing cabinet, my eyes scanning the familiar chaos of his desk. The sleek monitors, the stress ball, the coffee mug I'd made him in a pottery class years ago. My gaze caught on a small, rectangular slip of paper, half hidden under a legal pad next to his keyboard. It wasn't a receipt. It was too formal. The distinct font of a pharmacy label. I picked it up. My eyes scanned the information mechanically. Patient, Daniel Miller. Prescription, doxycycline hyclate, 100 milligrams. Date filled, 2 weeks ago. Refills, 0. For a moment, my brain stuttered, refusing to compute. Doxycycline. He wasn't sick. He hadn't been ill. We hadn't traveled anywhere that would require malaria prophylaxis. He'd had a persistent cough last winter. But that was months ago, and they'd given him a different antibiotic. Then, from the deep, dusty archives of my own memory, a fact surfaced. In my early 20s, before Daniel, I'd had a severe bout of bronchitis that turned into a minor respiratory infection. The doctor had prescribed me doxycycline. I remembered because it made me terribly nauseous. I'd complained to my mother, who was a nurse. She'd said, "Oh, that's a strong one. They use it for all sorts of things. Pneumonia, acne, even some STIs. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Sexually transmitted infections. The room didn't just tilt, it dissolved. The humming of his computer fans, the drone of his voice on the call, the sunlight streaming through the window. It all melted into a roaring, white-hot static in my head. The prescription slip trembled in my fingers. This was no longer about emotional betrayal, secret dinners, or whispered texts. This was a physical, medical, dangerous secret. He had been intimate with someone else. He had likely contracted something, and he had obtained treatment for it in secret, which meant he knew there was a risk he had then, by continuing to share a bed with me, by kissing me, by living as my husband, transferred to me, without my knowledge, without my consent. He had taken my body, my health, the most intimate and basic trust of shared physical safety within a marriage, and he had treated it with reckless, filthy disregard. My value to him, in that moment, was quantified as less than the potential embarrassment of a difficult conversation. The power balance reframed itself with brutal, crystalline clarity. This wasn't just a broken marriage I needed to mourn. This was a hostile environment I needed to survive. I was no longer a betrayed wife hoping for a confession or a change of heart. I was a person in active, quiet danger. The last fragile vestige of hope, the part of me that still whispered, "Maybe we can fix this," died a swift, silent death. It was replaced by something colder, harder, and infinitely more powerful. A clear, cold imperative for self-preservation. Protect yourself. Now. I placed the prescription slip back exactly as I'd found it. I left the office, my legs carrying me on autopilot down the hall, through the kitchen, and out the back door into the garden. But I didn't go to my bench. I went to the far end of the yard, to the old potting shed. It was my space, filled with the earthy smells of soil and peat, tools hanging neatly on the wall. He never came in here. It was the one place in the world that was still entirely, uncontestedly mine. I closed the door. The silence within was dense and real. I leaned against the rough wooden work table, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps that were not quite sobs. The grief was there, a vast black ocean of it waiting to drown me. But I couldn't afford to drown. Not yet. First, my physical safety, my health was the non-negotiable line in the sand. The next day, while he was at a supposed off-site meeting, I went to my doctor. I sat in the examination room, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. When Dr. Evans came in, her kind face expectant, I didn't mince words. I didn't cry. I was eerily calm. "I have concrete reason to believe my husband has been sexually unfaithful," I said, my voice flat. "I found a prescription for doxycycline in his name. I need a full STI panel, please. Everything." Her expression shifted from professional warmth to a deep, professional pity. She didn't ask questions. She simply nodded. "Of course, Clara. We'll get that done right now." The blood draw was quick. The kindness in the nurse's eyes as she tied the tourniquet was the first genuine, non-transactional compassion I'd felt in months. It almost undid me. I also booked an appointment with a therapist I found through a discreet online service. If I was going to rebuild my life, I needed to start with the architecture of my own mind. Second, information, knowledge, was my only currency now. I needed to understand the full landscape of what I was dealing with, not just the affair, but the financial reality. I didn't hire a private investigator. I hired a financial advisor, a steely-eyed, no-nonsense woman named Maureen who specialized in financial planning for women in transition. In her quiet, book-lined office, I told her the truth, leaving out the scent and the lace, focusing on the evidence, the hidden prescription, the financial anomalies, my complete lack of access to the business accounts. I believe my husband is hiding assets and has been financially unfaithful as well, I said. Maureen didn't flinch. She steepled her fingers. The first rule of this game is to secure your own copies of every financial document you can legally access. You have a right to this information. Tax returns, bank statements, investment accounts, business filings, the mortgage documents. You need to build your own file. So, I became an archivist of my own undoing. I operated in the quiet hours. When Daniel was at the gym, or playing golf with a client, or taking one of his increasingly frequent late-night strategy sessions, I used the shared laptop in the living room. I found digital copies of past joint tax returns in a folder marked Taxes Old. I went through the filing cabinet in his office when he was out, photographing every relevant paper with my phone. Bank statements from 2 years ago, the original mortgage agreement, business registration papers. I requested duplicate copies of recent statements from our joint bank, citing, "for my own records." Every scanned page, every photo was uploaded to a secure encrypted cloud storage account he knew nothing about. I was building a paper fortress, brick by digital brick. The hardest, most heartbreaking part was documenting my own contribution. For the law, my unpaid labor was nearly invisible. I needed to make it visible. I started a new digital journal, not a diary of feelings, but a log of evidence. March 12, 19, conceptualized and executed complete brand refresh for Apex Digital, including new logo, color palette, and website design. Approx. 60 hours of professional-grade work. April 3, hosted and catered dinner for 4 potential investors, sourced ingredients, prepared 5-course meal, managed evening logistics to facilitate deal discussion. Ongoing. Manage all Apex client invoicing and accounts receivable. Estimated 10 hours per week. I combed through old email archives, finding messages from Daniel. "Clara, the client loved the presentation deck you made. You saved the deal." I screenshot them. I found text threads where he asked for my design input on a new client proposal. I saved them. I was assembling a case for the most important client of my life, my future self, and any court that might need to listen. Finally, I began to establish a tiny foothold of independence. I opened a new bank account, online, in my name only, at a completely different financial institution. I had no income to put in it, but I needed it to exist. Then, I started selling things. Not our things. My things. A small collection of vintage costume jewelry my grandmother had left me. A few signed art books from college. I sold them quietly, one piece at a time, on niche online marketplaces. The amounts were small, $50 here, $100 there. I transferred every penny into my new secret account. It was a pathetic nest egg, but it was mine. It was a symbol. With Maureen's guidance, I also secured a preliminary consultation with a recommended divorce attorney, paying for the hour with my grandmother's brooch. Every action was quiet, deliberate, and perfectly legal. I was meticulous. I was a ghost in the machinery of my own life, carefully disassembling my connection to it from the inside out. The heartbroken Clara was locked away in a deep, soundproof room. The woman moving through the days was Clara the architect, Clara the strategist. She was calm. She was focused. She was building an exit. I waited. Patience was now my greatest weapon. I waited until I had the results of my medical tests, all negative, a relief so profound it made my knees weak. I waited until I had a solid folder of financial documents and my evidence journal. I waited until I'd had my full, frank consultation with the attorney, a sharp, compassionate woman named Susan, who laid out the cold, hard reality of marital asset division and spousal support. Then I chose a night, a Wednesday, nothing special. I made a simple pasta carbonara, his favorite. I lit a candle on the table. He came home tired, but in a good mood, talking animatedly about a huge new contract he was about to sign. "This is the big one, Clara. This changes everything." I nodded, smiling my wifely smile, plating the food. After dinner, I didn't immediately get up to clear the plates. I took a sip of water, folded my hands on the table, and looked at him. "Daniel, we need to talk." He looked up from his phone, where he'd been typing, a faint frown of annoyance at the interruption. "What's up? Something wrong with the house?" "No," I said, my voice unnervingly calm, a flat pond. "It's about us. I know about Kay Peterson. I know she isn't a client. I know about the hotel charges, the hundreds of text messages, the weekend retreat." I paused, watching the blood drain from his face, his expression cycling from surprise to confusion to dawning alarm. "And I found the prescription for doxycycline in your office." His facade didn't just crack, it shattered. His eyes widened, then narrowed. Panic flashed, then was swiftly overwritten by a defensive, outraged anger. "You've been spying on me?" he hissed, leaning forward. "Going through my private things? My medical records?" "I was looking for the home insurance papers," I said, which was the truth. "You left your secret sitting on your desk, Daniel. Just like you left her perfume on your shirts for me to find." He sputtered, began to bluster a denial. "It's not what you think. She's just a friend. The prescription was for a skin infection." But the details were too specific, the evidence too tangible. He saw the utter lack of hysteria in my face and stopped. The anger deflated, replaced by a wheedling, panicked plea. "Clara, God, it was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless thing. It's already over. It meant nothing. You have to believe me. You're my wife. We have 15 years. We can fix this. We'll go to counseling. I'll end all contact. I'll do anything. Just think of everything we've built together. This house, the business." "I have," I said, my voice still that terrible, calm monotone. I reached down to the empty chair beside me and lifted my folder onto the table. It was a plain, beige accordion file. I opened it. I slid out the copies of the tax returns, the bank statements with the suspicious charges circled in red, the printed pages from my evidence journal listing my unpaid work. Finally, I placed my lawyer's business card on top of the pile. "I've thought of it very, very carefully. I helped build all of this. My labor, my unpaid, professional grade work, is woven into this business. My financial contribution early on helped buy this house. I have consulted an attorney. This is her." He stared at the papers, then at me, his face a mask of utter gobsmacked shock. This wasn't the reaction he'd scripted. There were no tears, no screaming, no begging. This was a cold, transactional presentation. He was looking at a stranger. You're suing me? You're leaving?" "Yes," I said, closing the folder. "We will be dissolving our marriage through our attorneys. I will be asking for an equitable division of all marital assets, which will require a formal valuation of Apex Digital Solutions for the duration of our marriage. I've already moved my personal documents and some irreplaceable items to a storage unit. I'll be staying with my sister starting tomorrow while we work this out. The confrontation didn't escalate into a shouting match. The silence that followed my statement was more devastating than any noise. His shock curdled into a cold, calculated fury. He threatened. He told me I'd get nothing, that I had no legal claim to his business, that I was a gold digger who'd contributed nothing, that he'd drag this out for years until I was bankrupt. I just listened. I didn't argue. I didn't justify. I simply repeated, "My attorney has the information. You can direct all communication to her." My calm was an impenetrable wall. His threats echoed against it and fell away. Finally, he just sank back in his chair, all the fight draining out of him, replaced by a dazed, bewildered realization. The consequence of his choices wasn't just losing a forgiving wife. It was a costly, complex, and public dismantling of the empire he had believed was his alone to control. He was looking at a bill, and it was coming due. The divorce process took a little over a year. It was brutal in its paperwork, its depositions, its cold dissection of our shared life into columns of assets and debts. I let Susan, my attorney, be the warrior. I provided the documents, the journal, the evidence. I answered questions calmly and factually. I focused my energy not on the battle, but on the foundation of my new life. I used a small advance from what would eventually be my settlement to rent a tiny, clean, one-bedroom apartment across town. It had beige carpets and generic blinds, but the light was good. I took online courses to update my long-dormant graphic design skills, learning new software, building a modern portfolio from scratch. I reached out to old friends, one by one, with simple, honest emails. I've been through a difficult divorce, and I'm reconnecting with people who matter. Their responses were almost universally warm, filled with a kindness that healed something in me I didn't know was broken. The financial settlement was, in the end, fair. It was not a windfall, but it was recognition. It included a share of the equity in our home, a portion of the value his business had accrued during our marriage, a number significantly aided by my evidence journal, and temporary spousal support to help me reestablish myself. It was enough for a fresh start, but not enough for luxury. It was mine. I heard through the brittle grapevine of mutual acquaintances that Daniel married Kay Peterson within 2 years in a lavish destination ceremony. I felt nothing. Not anger, not resentment, a distant, profound relief, as if a door had finally closed on a room filled with toxic fumes. He was her problem now. I genuinely wished her luck. My life now is quieter. It is smaller in square footage, but infinitely larger in sovereignty. Every piece of furniture, the second-hand reading chair, the simple pine table, I bought myself. Every bill that arrives in my name is paid with money I earned. Every decision, from what to have for dinner to whether to take a professional risk, is mine alone. The garden is just a collection of pots on my apartment balcony, herbs, a tomato plant, a single, stubborn rose bush I managed to propagate from a cutting of my old garden. I tend them with a love that is no longer tied to anyone else's dream, but is a simple, daily practice of care for my own small world. The moral of this long, emotional story is not that love is a trap, or that trust is foolish. It is this: you must never, ever hand another person, no matter how much you love them, the only set of keys to your life, your security, or your sense of self. Giving everything doesn't make you a saint. It can, silently, make you a hostage in your own story. True strength is not found in the grand drama of confrontation, but in the quiet, terrifying, daily courage to reclaim your own name, to audit your own balance sheet, and to build your own peace, one deliberate, sovereign brick at a time. The most important journey you will ever take is the one back to yourself. If this real-life story of quiet strength and resilience resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like. It helps others find these calm narratives. If you're going through something similar, know that you are not alone. Share your thoughts or your own stories of finding your footing in the comments below. I read every one, and our community is here to listen. And if you'd like to join me for more real-life stories about healing, difficult truths, and the quiet power of rebuilding, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you for listening and for being part of this peaceful space.